What's the worst case you've seen someone trying to play the victim when it was all their own fault? Story 1. So, a few years ago, there was some Facebook drama involving a girl who had left a bar drunk and backed her car into the car of an acquaintance while exiting the parking lot. The next day, she went off on him for telling the police that he saw her do it despite knowing she was poor and could have just said he didn't see it and had his insurance paid. She kept digging a deeper hole, and all the replies were like, "Witch, don't drive drunk." It was glorious. Story 2. A local business owner and friend asked a lot of his regular customers to invest in his new business in Atlanta by buying shares. I bought in, knowing we wouldn't break even for at least 3 years, but that he could still sell religion to the Pope. We had losses for 2 years, broke even at 3 as predicted. 4 years in, he closed the Atlanta store and opened in another town, but this time he was doing it all with his own money. No way. He was doing it with the inventory and proceeds from the Atlanta store. He even had a shiny new house, cars, and the works for his new venture. He was shocked to the core and hurt when all the shareholders took him to court. Story 3. An older lady walked into a construction area where she knew she wasn't supposed to go just to snoop around when the workers weren't there, and then sued because she slipped on a plastic floor covering. She worked there. She knew the area was off limits. She did it anyway. Story 4. When I was teaching, I had a student I adored who had some behavior problems. I did everything I could to support him. One day we were taking a test and he was talking. I reminded him several times that talking during a test is not allowed, and I would have him go in the hallway if he continued. He continued talking, so I told him to go into the hall. He called me autistic on his way out, his favorite insult, so I wrote him a referral. I called his parents and they didn't answer, so I sent an email explaining what happened, that he got a referral, and that I hope we can work together to help him manage his reactions. His mother responded saying that my behavior is unacceptable and that she is done speaking with me and I will hear from her lawyer. She went all the way up the district level to complain about me, telling all sorts of lies and making me look like a horrible person. I don't teach anymore. Story 5. I was in a crowded parking lot driving around looking for a space. There was one car ahead of me. The car ahead of me stopped, so I stopped as well. I'm not sure why she stopped because there was no empty spaces and no one was pulling out, but whatever. Then, before I even had time to react, her reverse lights came on and she came flying backwards towards me. I didn't even have time to honk. She slammed into the front of my car, got out of her car, and started screaming that I hit her. When officers arrived, she was crying, shaking, and complaining that her neck hurt. She cursed me for slamming into the back of her car. Thankfully, 2 people had been walking through the parking lot when this occurred and told the officer what really happened. Later, the driver of the car that hit me tried to tell her insurance company that I knew the witnesses, and that's why they lied. I didn't know the witnesses, by the way. At any rate, if the witness hadn't stuck around to give statements, I'd have been screwed. Story 6. My best friend's ex-girlfriend was kicked out of her parents' house when she told them she was a lesbian. She moved in with my best friend since they were dating at the time. At first, she told my boyfriend that she was too depressed to find a job. My best friend was okay with that, even if it meant she'd have to work more, which she did. She even found a second part-time job, and for the next 6 months, whenever my best friend asked her if she'd found the job, she'd always get the "I'm too depressed" response. Eventually, my best friend finds out that her girlfriend cheated on her. Her excuse for cheating was, "You're always at work and never have time for me. I need someone who will be there for me." My best friend kicks her out, and then her ex blames her for having to move back in with her parents. The kicker? It turns out her parents never really kicked her out. She was just tired of them telling her to get a job. Story 7. Sometimes my children ask me why they've met my mother but never met my father. I tell them he died a long time ago, when I was a kid. In reality, though, my dad used to be an abusive drunk, and my mother had to kick him out because he used to beat on us kids. We used to spend weekends at his new house, but around the time I turned 10, he told my mother to stop dropping us off and gave her a shoebox full of all the pictures he had of us. We tried calling him on holidays every now and again, but he finally just told us to stop contacting him altogether. Last year, my mother passed away. He decided to reach out to me and express that he had changed and wanted to make things up to me. I told him it was okay, filled him in on how I was doing in life, and sent him pictures of my children. But I expressed that I was already a man and didn't need a father anymore, and he was forgiven for the 20-year absence. He then proceeded to tell me that I'm horrible for pushing him away and abandoning him, that he was dying and that he just wanted to fix things. So I just explained to him that it was already forgiven, but he abandoned me and I had no time for his foolishness. I wish things would have been different, but he's too much of a bad influence to allow in my children's lives. Story 8. An employee was being fired for a multitude of infractions at a coffee shop. He had been caught by management calling customers things like dumbass and stupid creep under his breath, and several customers had also reported the behavior. He was constantly late, would leave early, or beg others to cover his shift. Instead of restocking or cleaning the area during downtimes, he would take out his drumsticks and practice, which annoyed the other employees and customers. During inventory counts, we noticed whole pallets of sandwiches or baked goods were missing, as well as bottled drinks, etc. We were mysteriously out of huge 5-pound bags of espresso roast. The numbers weren't adding up. He was subsequently fired after being caught bad-mouthing a customer while a visiting manager was also in the cafe. The guy didn't know it. The guy blamed all the issues on everyone else. Late to work turned into, I missed the bus, or my roommate forgot to wake me up on time. Leaving early turned into, well, I got a call for a gig, there was a concert I wanted to see. Food missing turned into, I didn't have money to eat, and it's the company's responsibility to ensure I'm fed while on the clock. And calling customers' names turned into, they misunderstood me. Management would say, what part of calling a customer a dumb freak is a misunderstanding? Followed by, it's not my fault, they're so sensitive. All this dude's problems were blamed on everyone else, and all his issues and the situation in his life were blamed on everyone else again. We employees stopped inviting him out because at bars, he would order drinks, tell the bartender one of us was covering, and skip out or leave rapidly before the check was presented to us. He'd also walk around tables when people got up to dance or talk in a group and guzzle down their drinks. He was an all-around shy person. We found out after he was fired from a store that he was hired by a Starbucks in the mall who failed to call for a reference or check, even though our store was listed as the previous place of employment. He was caught stealing money and food from there too. I wanted to add that this was our worst employee. We had another guy who worked his ass off but had generally a bad demeanor, but he was a solid hard worker. One day, he sat down and watched the drummer dude spout his mouth off and treat customers like filth and turned to me and said, I hope to God I don't sound or act like that. And just from watching this one guy, the other employee became a model customer service employee almost overnight. Also, we had another guy there. He went by some weird animal name instead of his real name. He was sent home for showing up drunk several times and was let go after management found he snuck a bottle of vodka in and was adding it to girls' drinks during the late shift. Story 9. My brother-in-law, my wife's brother, believes that everything terrible in his life is the fault of others who conspired to be mean to him. He blames others for his drug problems and feels that the government should never have taken his child away from him since he believes he is a good father. And according to him, his disabled mother, who had custody of his child, made up stories about him hitting her and the child. So when the government told us, both APS and CPS, that we had to protect the child from him, he felt that we had no right to take his child away from him, even though he hadn't had custody of the child for years. He lives off of disability benefits due to back problems he got from a beating he received for running his mouth at the wrong people, despite his doctor's advice that he doesn't need a wheelchair and can work. He feels that it's our fault that he can't pay his bills even though he still lives rent-free in his mother's house, and he spends his disability checks on drugs and junk food as soon as he gets them. He believes that we have abandoned him to die and are terrible people for not letting him live with us. However, the government placed his mother and child in our care to keep them safe from him. He came up with a scheme where he called 911 to be taken to the local hospital and told them that he was dying because he was wheelchair-bound and abandoned in a squalid house. The house became squalid because he refused to clean and had a dog he never let outside. He managed to get Adult Protective Services to call us and tell us that we had to take care of him and fix up his house. However, we live 250 miles away in a different state. We explained the situation to APS and gave them the names of the caseworkers for his mother and son, who know him well. APS confirmed our story, but he demanded that they file a court order to force us to allow him to live with us, which was not possible. He became belligerent and screamed profanities at everyone in the hospital when he heard that we had refused to take him in. When the doctors told him again that he didn't need a wheelchair, he screamed at them. And after about 8 hours, when he still refused to leave, security had to drag him out and dump him into the parking lot. A few weeks later, he called us, begging us to pay his bills, and went off again about how we had no right to take his child away from him. He believes that we're terrible people because we refuse to acknowledge what a good father he is. He lives in a poor county in the rural South where it takes immediate danger to life for CPS to take away a child. However, they took away his child and even permanently removed his custody rights. They also determined that the child and his mother were not safe in the same house as him. He believes that we, quote, stole his kid. But despite my reluctance to raise another child, I am now raising his child because I can't turn my back on them. However, my brother in law believes that this is all a vast conspiracy to spite him. Story 10. I am so glad when I see these questions because I can talk about my sister. She's always been a loose cannon, creating chaos wherever she goes, constantly playing the victim and thinking the world owes her everything. Anyway, one day she calls my mom claiming the place she was staying was a cult. Weird, right? But we don't ask questions. She also claims that she was sexually abused by someone and he is following her. Okay, who's going to believe anyone who says that? She also claims that she's been watched by some weird government agent. Anyway, after all of this, my mom says she can stay with us temporarily, and my sister says a maximum of 2 weeks. Okay, for reference, my mom and I were living in an apartment that had a total of 5 rooms, a kitchen, a small random area that was 10 by 10, a bathroom, my room, which was a living room, and my mom's room. So basically, we had no space. Also, my mother has no money at all. She has just enough for rent and food, but that's with me even chipping in some every now and then. But she is family, and so I don't mind sharing my room with my sister for just 2 weeks. So she gets there and right away says she has no money, but she wants a job where she has to take the turnpike to a highly populated city, so my mom gives her her change jar for tolls only. It should have been about $5 a day. My sister uses 80% of my mom's change jar within a month's time. She was using it for gas, bills, food, anything and everything. But whatever, right? Damn, but whatever. There's nothing to call the constable over. Then she says, I still haven't found a place to live. I need 2 more weeks. Okay, fine, but you need to start helping us pay bills and such. She has a fit, freaks out, and says the entire family hates her. Whatever, perhaps she's just being dramatic. Mom gives her leeway on the bills until my sister feels more financially sound. Then my stepdad unexpectedly dies. My sister didn't even like my stepdad, so she's basically like, whatever, he's dead, and my mom is obviously torn. Her best friend died. So my sister goes into my mom's room 2 days after he passed away and says, Mom, you should go into a mental hospital. You're having a psychotic break. Excuse me? She said this because my mom had been crying since she found out he had died? Obviously, who wouldn't? Then my sister invited her children to come and live with us, her 12 and 19-year-old daughters and sons. And where are we going to put them? Who's going to pay for them? She didn't even ask. Then she posted something on Instagram with a sexual reference. I, being the youngest, commented like, lol, you, like I always do whenever my siblings make comments about sex. It's kind of a fun thing between us because my siblings laugh and I laugh and it lightens the mood. She starts acting really nasty to me though, telling me that my niece and nephew hate being there because of me, that they don't like me, I'm making mom's life hard, etc., all because of my comment. Eventually, all hell breaks loose and my sister is screaming and fighting with my mom, telling her the nastiest stuff, refusing to leave, literally going crazy. Hitting stuff, throwing stuff, threatening suicide, saying everyone hates her, telling my mom she was the cause of my sister's hard life. Like, what? And all this stuff that is just too long to write about in a Reddit post. So my mom says, you've been here for 2 months and haven't helped with the bills. You have to go. She refuses, calls the cops, claiming we are unlawfully trying to evict her. What? Anyways, my mom finally just told the landlord she couldn't stay there because of my stepdad's passing and that she was leaving. We all came, packed up my mom's stuff, and left. I don't know where she went after that, but I haven't talked to her since. She still claims that the family hates her because of me and my mom. She claims we didn't help her. She claims that the house fell apart because of me. She claims we all should have done more for her. She claims we don't love her and XYZ is why. She's the worst version of a human I've ever come into contact with. Story 11. Not the worst case I've experienced, but when I kicked my abusive ex out of my house, he started playing the homeless victim card pretty badly. Understand, when I kicked him out, it had been 10 months since we broke up. He strong-armed me into letting him live with me when I got a better place and he got kicked out of his friend's house. I was the only one working. He refused to watch our child while I was at work. He would get aggressive and violent if I even talked to another guy. And there were multiple cases of my best friend and only ally having to basically kidnap me to get away from him and keep me safe. Yeah, it was all just a messed up mess, but he started telling everyone I was this crazy, horrible person, how I kept him from seeing our daughter and how I was being a witch because I was jealous. For years afterward, everyone believed him, and I lost every friend I had. Thankfully, this story has a happy ending. It's been years since this happened, and now I'm in a healthy, happy, and safe environment. I met and married an amazing human being who held my hand and had my back when I started going to therapy to heal the wounds that were left, and he is the father of my youngest. My daughter is now 9 and is amazingly sweet and a strong girl, and I have an amazing group of friends who are the best support team anyone could ask for. Story 12. I was drugged by one of my religious leaders at around 20 years old, and to help me cope with it, I started seeing a therapist and made a dedicated journal for all these dark thoughts. Instead of trying to tell myself, I'm okay, life's okay, yep, it didn't happen, I'm fine, I could write all the deepest, darkest stuff my brain was thinking. I didn't tell my wife about my event, but she has a tendency to be snoopy. I am constantly waking her up about 2, 3 a.m. to go through my phone. So I told her about the journal. I made it clear that it is one thing under no circumstances she can read, that it is extremely personal, and if she wishes to read it at some point, she needs to talk to me about it and I'll decide if I feel it is necessary or beneficial. Of course, one day she comes out and says she read it. The excuse was terrible, and she's mad at me that I didn't tell her sooner. She believes that, as my wife, I should be comfortable telling her anything and everything. As the following weeks go by, I'm very angry with her, and she remains adamant that it was my fault because I didn't tell her sooner and that I should change my stance on things I tell her. A few months go by and I'm still upset, our relationship is still rocky, and she says, "Oh, wow, I thought you were over that by now." To which I reply back with, "No, of course I'm still upset. You betrayed my trust." She responds with, "Oh, I thought you were over the journal thing a while ago. I thought you'd be over your event by now with the therapy you've been doing." This woman was as insensitive as it gets, and needless to say, she's now my ex-wife. Story 13. My 50-something-year-old mom's very frequent non-sober calls and hysterics about how her life is ruined. This was after she turned our lives upside down with her alcoholism and drug abuse throughout our childhood, went to rehab 5 times and relapsed every time, was given literally countless chances by my dad and family to start fresh, including an amazing job and housing opportunities, nearly bankrupted my dad, forced him to move and raise 6 children on his own, and eventually lost relationships with all of her family and children except me, up until 2.5 years ago, when I received a call that she messed up again, got herself kicked out of her free housing arrangement, and lost her job before it even started, forcing me to go pick her up on the side of the road and crash at my apartment for the night. I remember when I was scrambling to hide all of the alcohol and pills in my place before getting her, then picking her up. She cried that my dad was still ignoring her and wouldn't give her money anymore. It really hit me that I'd finally had enough. Victimizers. Am I right, guys? Story 14. My cat plays with the closet door and sometimes shuts himself in. Then I get an angry cat yowling to be let out, and he acts like I'm the one who locked him in there. Or maybe it's just cats who want to leave the room right after they enter. I open the door and he just looks at me and meows. Usually, he just wants to be picked up and snuggled, but I can only do that for so long. He probably also wants food, as cats are just food screaming machines. But I don't want to overfeed him and make him overweight.